Okay, yeah, let's get into flushing because, well, first of all, there's a couple different definitions of flushing. Assuming that you're talking about running a large amount of water through the medium. So these, what I have is I have them in 10-gallon grow pots. I have like four different 10-gallon grow pots. They're in like fabric pots. And so my, usual definition of flushing is to run a large amount of water through the medium, but how much water? What type of water? So can you break that stuff down for me?
Sure. Yeah. And keep in mind, a lot of people talk about flushing in different ways. The flushing originally was this idea in or technique with mineral salts, so chemical nutrients, of reducing the amount of fertility in your soil towards the end of the grow as a nutrient restriction to create a nice senescence or fade or stress response from the plant as you finish, and get closer to harvest. What we're talking about when we say flushing is not anything that's happening while you have a plant in the soil. And keep in mind, we're not flushing any nutrients out of the plant itself. This is just a way of restricting what access it has to nutrients in the future if you ever do flush during a cycle. But when we're talking about flushing from a living soil organic perspective, or in the case of the soil test, what we're talking about is in between rounds, how do we get our levels back down to a good level on these minerals? And in this case, with a 10-gallon pot, so we have 10 gallons of soil, we'd want to get 40% of water through there after we've hit field capacity. With defining field capacity is the soil is fully saturated to where if you add one more drop of water, a drop of water is going to come out the bottom of that pot. So once we're at that state, adding 4 to 5 gallons of water to that 10-gallon pot will get us down to a level that we would want to consider it having been flushed. And you can use, a combo meter. You can check your runoff as a way to see if your EC is coming down. That's a great way to do it. If you don't have one, then you can kind of go off of those guidelines as a rough guideline. And then keep in mind that after you're done flushing, you've removed a lot of fertility. We potentially need to add a little bit back in for the next round after the soil is kind of dried out a little bit.
You want to turn that soil as you're getting it wet, because water is a polar molecule. It's going to take the path of least resistance. It's going to run through your root holes. It's going to run down the sides. And so a lot of people think that they're flushing when and they start counting that volume against the flush. You're really just getting the soil wet. Those first, introductory gallons. And so you want to get to that field saturation point. You can add a 0.5 gram of gypsum per gallon, and that will help displace something like sodium. And so that's a good thing to do. If your soil, and like Tad mentioned something really important, you don't want to do this in organics and living soil while you've got plants, because you'll really mess them up. You'll, drown the roots, and then there's no uptake. So you don't want to do it during. And so sometimes if your peat or your peat-based substrate has gotten dry after a harvest, and you need, say you take a month off after a harvest and you need to flush. So you would want to maybe use a surfactant to help, wetter spreader, penetrant, something to help get that soil wet, and then after you're done, it's a good idea. You've pulled the plants out, the roots are gone. That's a big part of the immune system. It's a good idea. Everybody on this call has, probably powdery mildew, fusarium, and botrytis on their foreheads. And so you can't exclude that stuff. And so getting trichoderma, lactobacillus, which is faster acting, something like that into your soil, just so those fungal pathogens don't get a toehold, is not a bad idea either. And then get your fans on, your dehu on, lights on, turn the temperature up, start getting those beds dry. You don't want to do a flush over like a weekend or a week-long period. I know people that want to do that just because it's a pain in the butt to flush. But you do want to try to just get it one and done, so that you're not, creating, super soggy, wet soil that can then start growing, anaerobes and things like that we don't want in our soil. So you do want to get it done as fast as you can.
Okay, the soil I'm working with is a little bit dry at this point, so I'm going to want to get it to field capacity. Then Ted had mentioned run 40% water through. Now, Brandon, you mentioned turn the soil as you're running water through it. So I should get it out of the container?
No, you can leave it in the container, but like if I go to a 4x4 bed as I'm getting it wet, I'm digging my hands in it. I'm feeling around all the corners. I'm making sure that I don't have any dry pockets, because what we're trying to do essentially is get everything into solution, and then it'll start flushing out. And if you've got an EC meter, you can watch it. You can watch, when you start a flush, you're like, oh, wow, this is remarkably low. What's going on? And then all of a sudden it spikes. You're like, okay, now we're cooking. Now we're actually removing ions from the system, from the solution. And so it's important to get the whole volume of soil to field capacity.
And keep in mind, we wouldn't want to flush with your current water, because that's just going to compound the problem that you're already dealing with. So you got to get the water corrected first before you do the flush. And then, as a side note, we were working with one facility, and they'd called us because they were having this issue where they had, prior to talking to us, they'd flushed their soil, and then they said the room just reeked. And so we got on a call with them, and we're talking through it. And it turns out, like Brandon mentioned, they hadn't turned the lights back on in the room. And so the room was sitting at 55 degrees, and that soil was just a mucky mess. So you really want to get the water back out of the soil. You want to get the heat back up, treat the soil like it has a plant in it post flush, just to get it back up to where you want it to be. Now, in your case, with 4 10-gallon pots, this is where it becomes a tough call to spend the money on a soil test, on an analysis, do a flush, re-add nutrients. This is a lot of work for, not a lot of soil, not a lot of plants. So I think this is a good kind of point to where you could have a conversation around, do I want to just start over? Now, one reason not to start over, well, 2 reasons would be, one, from a sustainability perspective. You have this media you've been using, unless you can use it somewhere else in your garden, you don't want to just throw it out, because that's wasteful. But the other reason is, this soil and the microbes in it have sort of co-evolved with your plant over the course of these 8 cycles. You've built this robust evolutionary ecosystem of microbes that do really, really well with the plant that you're growing. And some people want to preserve that because they feel it gives them a better expression, whether that's terpenes or other secondary metabolites, by having that. So there's some considerations as to whether or not you want to keep your soil, whether or not you want to go through the process of doing the soil testing and flushing in this case. But as long as you're thinking about these different variables, I think you can make a really good decision.
Yeah, I was going to ask, where flush should I flush down the drain, or should I flush kind of outside by my trees or veggie plants? Because some of that runoff has the nitrogen in it, has some usable stuff in it.
I would try to recycle it. I would dilute it probably, and just put it around my garden if you have the time and the back to do it. I do know lots of growers, like my twin brother's in a wheelchair a lot of the time and really can't move around like that. And so he's going to have a really hard time doing that, but he's also a very conscientious person and doesn't want to just put that down the drain. There's some really horrible recent research tying the, high nitrate levels that are in our water, because of over application, to really high cancer rates. And so that's something that we all want to do our part on, whether it's just how we use nitrogen, how we use phosphorus. We want to use that judiciously. We want to be good neighbors, good stewards.
I would worry a little bit about the sodium and chloride, so I'd be very selective about where I put that back into the soil or into the groundwater. But Brandon is right, high nitrogen, high phosphates can contribute to algal blooms in environments like where I live in the Northwest, which creates a lot of problems for marine life. So yeah, we just want to be conscientious with how we're reusing. I wouldn't want high levels of sodium or chlorides. I wouldn't personally want to use this water back in my garden when I know I have clean water that I can use, whereas I have other forested areas where I could easily dump that out and just give plants a little boost.
Yeah, and in your specific case, Tad brought up a great point about, we spend years, the hardest thing for me moving to Washington wasn't leaving plants behind, it was leaving my soil behind. I had a leaf mold pile that was 12 years old. Leaving that behind was heartbreaking. In this case, your sodium, your chlorides, your nitrates, they are so high that I'm sure, we talk a lot about how in organics, we kind of overemphasize this message that any kind of salt is going to wipe out your biology. And it's not. We've seen that, and that's well documented at this point. Levels this high are definitely going to negatively impact your microbes. And so I wouldn't think that this would be the most microbial active soil. So if I was doing a plus and minus chart, I'd be minus on the biology on this one just because of it's so high. Tad mentioned you're at the level of detection. We don't know how high that chloride is. Your nitrogen's 300%. So probably not the best microbes.
Got it. Okay. So I will flush these 4 containers of 10 gallons. I get them to field capacity and then I run 40% water through. So it's a 10-gallon container, 4 gallons of water. I'll run that through and I'll check the EC, ppm of the runoff. What EC or ppm should I be aiming for in that runoff once it's kind of complete there?
I usually tell people to look for it to cut in half is more of a metric that I usually give people. And on that biology note, you might want to do an aerated compost tea when you transplant just to get some good biology because you're going to flush this soil heavily, so it might not be a bad idea to do that. But cutting it in half, definitely, you want to be like below 2.4 for sure. But I will say EC for an ionic solution is not the same thing as EC for organics. And so there's some there's some play in the steering wheel there. So that's a lot of times why I tell people to shoot for half because that's a little bit more reliable than trying to guesstimate what these ECs actually are.
And then after I do that flush, should I do another soil test and send it out to the lab and see where we're at? Or do you think it's safe enough at that point, doing those flushing steps process, safe enough to just amend in with stash base, for example, and then start the next run?
Most of our guys on the commercial side don't have time to wait for a test to come back at that point after flushing. They need to get back into that soil really fast. So we typically don't recommend a second soil test. And for home growers, it costs too much money. Now you're $200 in at this point. So it's just not worth it. Now, I think once the soil is dried down to a level that you would think is acceptable for a plant to be in, you could reincorporate in stash base, and we do it at a much lower rate. And then having stash base or stash bloom on hand would allow you to manage your fertility that next cycle, knowing that we're going to aim low and then have a little bit that we can add throughout the cycle. And the thing to keep in mind with these amendments, whether it's our nutrient pack, or in this case, we're talking about the stash bloom or stash blend, stash base, those take 7 to 10 days to really become available to the plant. So by the time you see a deficiency, you're already behind the clock. And that's where I like to there's certain products that we just like to keep on hand. And so if you already have some old grower bloom fertilizers, those might work. But if you don't, having a liquid like fish hydrolysate is a great option for folks as sort of a Band-Aid, a way to kind of limp through with regular feedings to give your plants a little bit of nitrogen, available phosphorus, and low levels of potassium. So there's a few things we like to have sort of in our toolkit just around our house. I like to have a pound of potassium sulfate, for example, so I could give 50% potassium in solution if I need to really quickly. And then the fish hydrolysate really takes care of the nitrogen and phosphorus for you as a quick feeding source.
Understood. And then, so you mentioned after the flush, do a reduced dose of stash base. How much of a reduced dose? Roughly, half of what the application rate says on the bag, or would it be even more than that?
I think half's probably a good starting point.
Okay.
Yeah, half's a great place. And then especially for growers like yourself who have obviously had their foot on the gas, I would say as like a really good golden rule, treat your soil like soup. You can always add to it. You can't get anything back out of it, not while your plants are in there. And so listen to your plants. Your plants will not lie to you. And so if your plants are not showing any deficiencies, then don't feed them in the, Steve Solomon calls it the Samoa approach. You put Samoa on, and you'll eventually end up back at this kind of toxic levels.
This clip is brought to you by Stash Nutrients. Use coupon code THESTASH for a discount on your order.